Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Our great friend Dennis Mansfield joining us. Dennis, how are you?
Kevin, it's great to hear your voice. I wish I were in the studio with you today.
Well, you're not. You're on location for another book. Before we get going, you're a podcaster now, a best-selling author, a political wonderkin. On this on this day after the 4th of July, what does America mean to you?
You know, it's an amazing thing when you think about those three parts of my own particular life, where I write, I have the honor of giving commentary on politics, and I communicate through the medium of today. I think about how our founding fathers, in their world, they wrote, they were involved in politics, they were involved in the media of their day. And when you think about the Declaration of Independence, and you think about what it did, it was a document for the ages, certainly for Americans, but it was really a document for the ages for all citizens. It's a global document, and it has allowed people throughout the ages since 1776, specifically July 2nd when it was done, and of course the 4th is when they signed it. 4th is when we celebrate it, but John Adams said the 2nd of July would be celebrated for generations to come with fireworks and with all sorts of other things. Well, he's off on the date, but he was right on with the celebration. And I think it means to me that we continue that spirit of speaking into the political climate of our day because, you know, it's a democratic republic. We have the opportunity to participate, that we also communicate with one another, and that in the process of it, we write our thoughts down. Those are the three things that are part of my life now because they were a part of their lives then.
Okay, before we get to our continued celebration of America and find out what you're up to, I have to ask you, we've been talking about this all week, the big news that happened last week where a person that you've worked with, a good friend of yours, someone that you helped get elected, Congressman Raul Labrador, is now the chairman of the Republican Party, winning 111 to 109 against former state school superintendent Tom Luna. Your initial thoughts?
Well, two things that were interesting about that, and I think the delta between those 2 points, those two votes, really point towards the reality of the fact that somehow, some way, communication broke down between Tom and Raul. They probably shouldn't have run against each other, just because of their long-term friendship. When it came out that Raul wanted to run and Tom made his decision to run, it was kind of amazing because many people don't remember that Raul was real specific in making sure that when Russ Fulcher had the opportunity to run for Congress, that he was, that we didn't have another conservative who had been elected entered in. Certainly, we had a conservative that was not elected, had not been elected in the form of Tommy. But when Tom Luna was talked to and he agreed not to run for Congress, it really helped. It really helped Russ Fulcher out in a major way. When it came down to this opportunity for Tom and for Raul to run, I found it a little bit disappointing that Russ did not endorse Raul out, and come out swinging for him. That's just my own personal thought because I think he owed it to him, and I think that the fact that the vote was so close, it would not have been that close had the sitting incumbent congressman of the 1st District actually come out and said, hey, Labrador's the one. That's just and of course I'm dear friends with Russ. He and I have not talked about it. I don't know what his reasoning was, but just from a political consultant perspective, it would have been wise for him to have done that. I think it would have changed the course, and I think the balance would have been much different.
Our great friend Dennis Mansfield joining us, and we never get a chance to pick your brain about politics here on KIDO Talk Radio. So, you take a look at Congressman Labrador, state representative, congressman, very competitive race for governor, the darling of conservatives. I don't know. Look, you're a writer, you're a podcaster, you're a public official, you're a political consultant. Would you describe him as an enigma? I mean, how would you define him? Because he is his own man, and now he's taken over the state party.
Yeah, he is. He's the real deal. Let's take it back to Meg Greenberg's book, Washington. She was a writer for Time magazine, and she was that face on the end of the last page of Time. And she wrote a book called Washington, and in it talks about the different kinds of behavior patterns of the people who run for politics. A lot of them are extroverts. She compares it to high school. And so if you were to look at that comparison for high school, Raul was the studious introvert who might have taken theater and learned how to play a part in the play. And when the part was played, he was done, and people misunderstood that the person on the stage was the person who's in the wings after the play. Raul is a very personal, kind, a firm individual who knows that he has to compromise at times, but he doesn't compromise in philosophy. I mean, I've been side by side with him since my heavens, I think December of 2009. I kind of know what I'm talking about. Number two is that he's learned, I think, over these years in Congress and certainly through the gubernatorial race, that there are kinder ways to say things than just being blunt. He is blunt and must be blunt in politics. Otherwise, you're a squish, and people will not respect that. They might think that you're with them, but when the vagaries go away and the reality of what your vote was, and they go, hey, I thought you were with me. That's not Raul. Raul says, I'm not with you, and these are the reasons why. What he hadn't done in the past was tell me your reasons why you think I'm wrong. I think now he's doing that, and he's learning at an incredible rate to say, hey, let's come aboard, let's see what this is all about. Remember, party politics and the state, chairmanship is a very odd deal. You have to bring consensus. You have to bring a bit of compromise, and you have to bring the left, the middle, and the right together in order to maintain the momentum to elect U.S. senators and U.S. congressmen and a strong House and a strong Senate and statewide races. You have to do that. And I think that his years in Congress, his years in the House, and now what will be his years as chairman will show that he'll be one of the best chairmen we've ever had.
Well, let's delve into this because, Dennis, you as someone who's been intimately involved in some of the most successful campaigns in the state history, you know what I'm talking about. You've got your establishment wing, you've got the Liberty wing, and we're not just talking about posts on Facebook back and forth. The conservatives have argued for years that they've been shut out. Now they have one of their own in there.
Yeah, I think that the conservatives who are part of the Liberty wing, the conservatives who are economic conservatives, the conservatives who are faith-based social conservatives, they can give a cheer that they're going to get someone. They now have someone who is not an establishment guy. Now comes the question: what do the establishment Republicans have to say? Well, look, they were very involved in helping Brad Little get elected. Brad Little is a fine man. He was a great lieutenant governor. I think he's going to end up being one of our greatest governors. And he's going to, I think, in the last analysis, surprise the establishment Republicans because he's his own guy. And he's, you don't do what he's done in his business and his family and managed all the things that he's managed over the years by being some, going back to that analogy, high school kid who wants to be liked. That's not the way Brad is. When Brad interviewed with the Idaho Chooses Life board for their endorsement, it was one of the most remarkable things that board, I wasn't there at the time, but the members of the board told me that they met the real Brad Little. So I think the establishment people are starting to scratch their heads because they're getting older and they're retiring and they're going on their way, and the real second generation or third generation of establishment Republicans think that the entitlement that they had because they worked for XYZ Corporation or they do whatever, they were the right-hand person to Joe Blow, who was a big shot during this, other administration. When it doesn't work that way. Everything happens in the context of relationship. Everything. And if these establishment, and that goes for the liberty people too. If the liberty people don't have relationship with people, and they think their philosophical true north is going to win the day, they've missed politics. Okay, they've missed politics because everything in politics is relationship. So when you don't have a relationship, you ain't got nothing.
I'm with you. Our great friend Dennis Mansfield joining us, author, podcaster, political consultant, business coach. And I might be getting into the weeds with you, but, you've got this recent spat between the IdahoConservatives.com and the Liberty Movement on Facebook. They seem to be going at each other. And if you read the post, a relationship between the two sides seems few and far between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the nature of sort of the internecine relationship of conflict and, definitely not conflict avoidance with conservatives, but sort of the ballroom brawl is that, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. There's going to be some piece of legislation that someone's going to, get crucified on because that's the hill they decided to die on. Well, politics is the two things. Politics is an ongoing game, and it's an old man's game. What I mean by that isn't sexist. I mean, it's a person who has been involved and stays involved and realize that when Ronald Reagan came in, he did good things. When Ronald Reagan left, we were still involved. When George Herbert Walker Bush came in, we did things. We were still there when he exited. Fill in the blank. Right now, everybody's a Trumper in the conservative movement. He will go his way. When he does, the issue still comes back to the philosophies that we believe in. And if it's lower, lesser government, it's lower taxes, and it's choice in education, and it's the sanctity of life, and it's these conservative components, that if people don't like that, they're in the wrong movement or they're in the wrong party, because that's what the GOP is. And the Big Tent thing does not mean that there's an avenue for socialists. There isn't. That does not mean that there's an avenue for people who want to kill babies after they're born. There isn't. Okay? And there's many other things that part of the conservative nature we can all agree on in the GOP that, you're in the wrong party if that's what you're wanting to do with the GOP in Idaho. It's not going to work.
More coming up with our great friend Dennis Mansfield. We're going to find out about his latest projects, and if you haven't heard of his work, where you can get the work, the books, the podcast, everything else. We can't wait to hear more of what Dennis has to say. And coming up next, we'll continue to revisit Idaho Republican politics just for a couple more seconds and talk about Paulette Jordan and really whether or not the Democrats should be feared. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And welcome back. Our great friend Dennis Mansfield with us, KIDO Talk Radio. Getting a little choked up here. Love talking politics, Dennis. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they get your news, your information, and perhaps get your latest piece of work?
Well, thanks, Kevin, for asking. A simple way is DennisMansfield.com, DennisMansfield.com. On that, you'll see a link for the author portion of what I do. Click onto that and see the 8 books that I've published, or the 7 books that I published, the 8th book that is being published this summer. The opportunity to see the business coaching that I do, and I'm honored, really honored. After I got out of public policy, with the Idaho Family Forum, now almost 20 years ago, I went back into business, because I'd owned a number of companies prior to working with Focus on the Family and the Idaho Family Forum. And what's really happened is I've gotten a few gray hairs, a few more gray hairs, and lost a few of the other hairs. Kevin, you call it follically challenged one time. I'll take that hit. Is that I began coaching businessmen and businesswomen to be able to really see the bigger picture. At West Point, we used to call it the whole person. And it wasn't just you're in it to make money. What are you doing to change the lives of the employees, things like that. And my coaching section has a button you can click on. And then, Kevin, under DennisMansfield.com, there is the podcaster. The podcasting is just, after many, many months of preparation, will have been launched this summer. And I want to just take just 2 more minutes to tell you, Kevin, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me probably 2.5 years ago to put a podcast together. And so I did. It took a while to get everything organized, but it's called Just Around the Corner. And it'll be available through all the normal ways that if you're a podcast listener, pick it up. Episode 1 will be fresh off the out of the studio here shortly, and will be available. But in it, Kevin, at the end of it, I off of every episode, and we've got about 7 that are in the can right now. Each one will be released a little bit after the other. I say thank you to a number of people, one of whom is you. And I say kudos to Kevin Miller in the Morning, because you encouraged me to do the thing that I really didn't know that I wanted to do. And my friend, it has absolutely been a blast.
Oh, yeah.
Three areas that I'm doing. You told me to keep it simple. And first area is culture. So I have a series of different people I have the honor of either interviewing or giving cultural updates on. Second is travel, because as you know, I'm here on Catalina Island doing research on my next book, and that's 26 miles across the sea from Los Angeles. It is remarkable in travel to be able to record things like what I'm doing on some archaeological digs and some other things. And then the third one is just the idea of entertainment. There was an old book that was called Entertaining Ourselves to Death. He was wrong. The author of that was wrong, because part of our culture is understanding that entertainment, all forms of entertainment, are the parables of our lifetime, if we'll let them be. As a Christian, when I read the New Testament, I love the fact that Jesus spoke in stories, in episodic stories. There was a guy, he had 2 sons. They did this and that. There's a woman, she lost a coin. She did this and that. And it illustrated, for me, truth that was really kind of cool, to learn. So anyway, those are the 3 things. It's called Just Around the Corner, because, Kevin, the world is just around the corner.
And he's a natural. Dennis Mansfield, DennisMansfield.com. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So, one more question about, one more. We'll go to Paulette Jordan in a minute, but the first one is, okay, so during that incredible campaign, Tommy Ahlquist, Brad Little, Raul Labrador.
Yes.
Afterwards, the congressman, the doctor, and the lieutenant governor each thought they had won that day going into the night. The congressman was very critical of the state party, very critical of the eventual governor, very critical of Tommy Ahlquist for the way he was treated. It's fascinating to look at. He was specifically critical of the Republican Party for, quote, allowing lies to be aired about him. How does he rectify that, considering that tough primary loss lesson, and now he is the state party?
That's a great point. Well, here's the deal. I was 20 years ago. I was on the losing end of a race for Congress against Butch Otter, and when you lose a race that's really that big, a lot of things in our lives hinge on: are you going to D.C. or are you not going to D.C.? What comes next after you lose? And I think you're dealing with an incredibly bright man who had never lost a race. Never. He had never lost a race. And so suddenly he loses one, and it's big. And it's big. He gave up a seat in Congress, which he could have kept for the next 20 years. He gave it up, and he ran, expecting to win. That's the way you run. You run to win. And when he came face-to-face with what Abraham Lincoln came face-to-face with, what so many people, Butch Otter back in the 70s, came face-to-face with, other people, myself included, I think he just reacted rather than responded. And I think if you were to ask him over a lunch, he would probably say, yeah, there's better ways I could have done it. And he'd be honest, and I think he'd be in good company, because there's better ways I could have done it. I did help when I lost, but I didn't help as much as I could have. And it took a while before I went, okay, that's politics. That's bad high school. This is the way it goes. If you're going to get in, you're going to get bruised. If you're going to get bruised, you might get bloodied. And might bloody other people. So are there facts that were inaccurate? Oh, I'm sure there were. Were the typical political stupidity things that were said on all sides? Obviously, there were. Did factions that were supposed to go either the political or religious factions going away different than what they could have gone? Of course. In Idaho, that's the brew, man. That's the brew. You just stir it all together and watch what bubbles up.
Dennis Mansfield joining us, DennisMansfield.com, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Does this set him up for another run at Congress, at the Senate, or the governorship?
Well, it's a very interesting thing. You know how people always talk about vice presidents and whether they're, Biden is a great example. Did that set him up for the run for president? The truth of the matter is, just as vice presidents very seldom actually win, George Herbert Walker Bush was an anomaly. They normally get through death, or in the case of Gerald Ford, he wasn't even elected as vice president, but through resignation. The reality in this is that a state chairman position very seldom moves itself into a high-profile way to run. Ron McMurray was a great example. I think he ran for Congress twice, once against Helen Chenoweth and once against Butch and me. It didn't get him anywhere. Norm Semenko. We had just a number of fine people that could have served well. But the inter-party rivalry that happens at conventions and the goofiness, again, I want to go back to the term bad high school. The bad high school vibes that happen in a convention do not a statewide candidate make. Now, that's the history of it.
Now, hold on, Dennis. Dennis, let's take a break on that. Can you hang on for a minute?
Sure, absolutely.
More coming up with Dennis Mansfield, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And welcome back, Kevin Miller, Dennis Mansfield, DennisMansfield.com, talking about Idaho politics. So you were comparing the whole shebang, the politicians, to being back in high school, and being a party chairman doesn't necessarily translate into greater elected office.
No, it doesn't. But I do think what it does is it creates a greater national image for Raul. And I think ultimately with the potential with President Trump winning in 2020, he's going to be looking to fill again or to fill previously unfilled spots. And it would not surprise me with a really good resume that Raul has that President Trump wouldn't bring him into his second administration in some fashion. And I think he'd be wise to do it. Whether Raul would want to go back and do that, it's a whole other issue. But I do believe that the chairmanship would afford that opportunity to be visibly seen on the national scope. So the other fellows who did act as chair, they saw it as more local and more provincial. I think Raul, and again, I haven't talked with Raul about this particular issue, but it certainly, as someone who's believed in him since the day I came on and was his spokesman in 2010 for his race, I believe he's wise enough to realize that if he wants to do that, the national doors will be open to him.
Dennis Mansfield joining us, DennisMansfield.com, writer, business coach, podcaster, man of the world, political consultant as well on KIDO Talk Radio. What about Paulette Jordan? Ran a horrible race, but got a big percentage of the vote. And Dennis, are you concerned that the libs are here to stay?
Well, I don't mean to have a chuckle in my voice because I never dismiss anybody. Everybody has an opportunity. What was fascinating to me about that poorly run race was that she could have easily have been the female Larry Echohawk. Could have easily done so much. Larry was the Attorney General years ago, American Indian, ran for governor. Phil Batt beat him just barely. There was a proposition on regarding stopping special rights that helped Phil Batt win that race. Paulette was a victim of her own press releases. I don't know. I mean, it's like, the nation of Ada has a way of just sort of speaking sort of progressive thoughts into people's brains as they sleep, politicians in Boise. And I think somewhere along the line, they thought, hey, if we can win Ada, well, okay, Ada County has gone very Democratic and very liberal. And the only reason it has, I believe, is because the state party, going back to the discussion about Raul, and certainly the Ada County party, have not fielded municipal candidates that could kick their butts. I mean, Dave Vider's a fine man, but people give him, in fact, here's a great quote. Ulysses S. Grant talked about Robert E. Lee in his autobiography, and he said that people ascribe to Robert E. Lee almost Superman tendencies because of who they thought he was. Grant said, but I knew him to be a man, and I knew that I could defeat him. I'm telling you right now, with the right combination, get a quality woman or man in who has conservative ideas and has a vision for the city of Boise and Ada County, et cetera, I think we could break the back of what looks like a very, strong liberal agenda in Ada County. I don't believe that agenda will be bought in, the smaller counties. I don't believe it'll ever really move its way into Canyon County, and I don't believe it'll be a political worldview that Coeur d'Alene or Boundary County or any of the others will do. It is the state of Ada, and they're going to be happy with the ones that they have. And at a certain point, if the state and Ada County GOP parties combine, they'll put a 1-2 punch together that'll just cream these guys, and they'll be wondering what the heck happened at their next parade.
Well, it is fascinating that Paulette Jordan beat A.J. Belukoff, who some say would have given Brad Little much more trouble. Obviously, he would have run a more effective campaign.
I think, I've seen A.J. a couple different times, bumped into him, and I think he's still sort of going, what the heck happened? Almost the Thomas Dewey effect, I think he was ready to be the nominee, and there have been a couple races in Idaho history that have been fascinating, where guys still had tons of dough in their account because they just had to get through the darn primary, and all of a sudden they lose. I mean, Von Ward was one, AJ was one, a number of people in the past history that were that way. And the thing was, I don't think AJ saw the train coming while he was walking on the tracks. And I don't know if that was his pollster. Some people believe because they ran once before, their name ID is sky high. When Russ Fulcher was considering running for governor and had announced for governor the second time, I cautioned him deeply. I said, dude, they don't know who you are, man. They voted against Butch for a guy named Russ. And now that was true for a large part of it. At that time, what Russ was successful at doing was going back and connecting them with saying, hey, I'm the guy that you voted for. I'm Russ Fulcher. And then he built his really successful juggernaut. AJ just was like, hey, I'm the guy. Hey, I was the guy. I'm the guy who lost, And it's like, oh, my gosh. So I don't know who ran that race, but I hope they're in another state because AJ really deserved a better consultant than whoever he had.
Poor A.J. Belukoff. Dennis Mansfield, DennisMansfield.com on KIDO Talk Radio. 107.5 FM, 5:80 a.m. with Kevin Miller in the morning. Okay, back to the patriotism. You've studied history. You're a West Pointer. You know all about, the values and ideals of our great nation. Your thoughts on, the day after the 4th of July?
Let me put it to you this way. I also love in my books, my most recent book that'll be published this summer is called To Trust in What We Cannot See. And it deals with the issue of signatures, autographs, and time travel. It's a historical science fiction book. I love it. Not because I wrote it, but because it was fun to write. And it was historical. Do you know that in signatures, the number one signature autograph that demands the highest amount of money for a sale is William Shakespeare's? You know what number 2 is?
I would guess Lincoln.
That's what many people do. The problem is it's wrong. It is a signator on the Declaration of Independence. His name from Savannah, Georgia, was Button Gwinnett. Button Gwinnett. Over $1 million per autograph. Why? Well, because Button Gwinnett was one of the first founding fathers to die after 1776. He lived until 1777, was involved in the duel in Savannah, Georgia, and was shot dead. It was a fascinating thing because he was a founding father that nobody ever thinks about. And there were tons of other Button Gwinnett's that signed that were a part of that helped in their local area. And I think that's the beauty, not just in the legacy of a Button Gwinnett that gets $1 million for signature, but in the reality that we all have incredible heritage because these men and their wives gave of themselves for their lives' liberty and their sacred honor. And I think the day after Independence Day is really sort of I always think of it as the day after a wedding. You know, you've had the wedding, you've had the wedding night, and now you're into the idea of, okay, well, we've got to start our honeymoon. And I made a decision 42 years ago when I married Susan that my honeymoon would never be over and that I'd never call her my wife. She would always be my bride. When I look at our national government, and I look at the history of America, I see it as the bride of freedom. And it's always fresh, and it's always new. And when people say it's a living document, the Constitution, they're in error because I'm a traditionalist and I believe in the original intent. But it is a living spirit of independence that continues to move us. Whether we run for office or whether we... Listen, government starts with self-government. We got to quit drinking. Nothing wrong with having a beer or this, but we got to quit getting drunk. We got to quit treating our wives like trash. We got to quit treating our husbands like trash. We got to quit the stuff that goes outside of self-government. We got to govern ourselves. Then we can govern our cities. Then we can govern our states. And then with a bunch of people who are really adults, who are really responsible, we get the honor of governing our nation, even if we're different politically, liberal, conservative, progressive, traditional. We get the honor of moving together towards compromise, which is the essence of what, the whole movement of the Declaration of Independence. And then, of course, Articles of Confederation, and then the constitutional form of government. All that came from bringing those people together. And I think Americans are sick and tired of a lot of this tearing apart stuff. Whether people say it's social media, I don't believe it is. That's just the medium. It's the attitude of inability to self-govern, to shut people's mouths, to treat people the way we want to be treated. We should do that, not just because it's a religious concept, but because it's a concept that works.
Our great friend Dennis Mansfield joining us, DennisMansfield.com, podcasting, political consultant, business coach, writer, author. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at what it takes to be a writer and, of course, what Dennis thinks about, the last half of the year when we're looking at not only local, state, but national politics. And we'll get his thoughts. We'll again ask him to take off his author hat and put on his political consulting hat as we look at the 2020 presidential campaign and what he thinks of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the band of usual suspects. You don't want to miss it. We so appreciate you joining us here each and every morning, and particularly the day after the 4th of July, right here on your home for Sean Hannity, Fox News, and Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. KIDO Talk Radio, blessed to be with you. Dennis Mansfield with us, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So, Dennis, we've got the final segment here. Did you ever think that you'd be writing all these books at any point in your life?
Kevin, I never did. My bride, Susan, who you know and who loves you and listens to you every morning, she listens to you more often than I do. She's always like, we get together and she goes, I'd like to quote Kevin Miller to you. I'm like, okay, baby, go for it. She's like your fangirl, man. Anyway, Susan told me years ago, Dan, I think you should write. In fact, I think you must write. And it wasn't until years later, after I was out of public policy and after I was just helping and being sort of a Barnabas, if you will, a supporter and encourager to others, that the tragedy of my oldest son passing away, Nate died, and Simon & Schuster came to me and asked me if they paid my salary for a year, would I write a book about what it's like to be a conservative Christian dude who loves his son, and his son gets caught in the undertow of opiate addiction and then dies. It was a very difficult thing, obviously, just to live through, because I love Nate with all my heart. He was the coolest guy. He actually, years ago, ran the very first race for Get Out the Vote for Mike Moyle. And Mike Moyle won by 13 votes. And Mike, to today, will always talk about 16-year-old Nate Mansfield, who got him into politics. It's a remarkable story. And so I said, okay, all right. And so I took a year, and I wrote from my heart, I wrote from my head. The book was published about 5 years ago, called Beautiful Nate. It's based on the song Beautiful Boy by John Lennon. Certainly the tragedy of what we went through, and the things I learned, the things my wife learned, and the things that we wanted to share with others to encourage them to have hope in the middle of a hopeless situation. That then led to my next book. It's called Finding Malone, the story of reconciliation with people that are irregular in your life. Mine happened to be my dad. And it was a great opportunity to help others and be encouraged by others. I end, actually, that book with the successful night of Raul Labrador's race for Congress. And it was just a sweet thing to end that book with that. The others that just started happening, Ryan Pacheco and I did a book on Isaac Jones, a fictional CIA character. We did 2 of those books. Cameron Ventura and I did a book for young adults called Do or Die. And I wrote a devotional because, as you know, you and I are big dog guys, and our dog lost her vision, and we had to have her eyes amputated, and her name was Coco. And so the book is a daily devotional that I learned about God and dogs, G-O-D, D-O-G. And that just took off, and it's helped a lot of people. A lot of humor. You know me, Kev. I mean, I take a lot of issues seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. Are you kidding me? I know who I am. And I'm married to Susan, who won't let me take myself seriously. She's great. 42 years of that. I can't wait for the next 42. And then what I learned was that if I wanted to write, I didn't want to be a writer. Isn't that weird? I wanted to be an author, because an author speaks from their authority on the issues. I didn't want to be hired to write somebody's, autobiography, or to write something on some economic principle of which I have no interest. I wanted to write about the things that captured my attention. So every book I approach from an author position. And the most recent one, this historical science fiction one, just basically involves Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Lenin. It involves I don't know if you remember Marshal Tito. All the dictators of the Second World War in 1913 lived as neighbors and went to the same coffee shop, and nobody knew each other. It's a remarkable, true tale. And I asked the question, making it the fictional, if I could go back through history, through time, through space-time, would I take them out before they were known dictators and genocidal maniacs? And that's the premise of it. It's a book one of a 3-book trilogy. And so what I do is every morning I write from 8 o'clock until noon. I write. I am diligent about that. If anybody out there is a writer and would like to find out a good way to study it, look up Stephen King's, one of his only nonfiction books. It's called On Writing. Stephen King, On Writing. And it really helped me. It was a tutor to me on the disciplines that I needed. And is every day a good day for writing? Every day is a good day for writing. Do I write well each day? No. But that's why I go back and I have great editors, and there are some days where I knock it dead. Other days where I'm just writing. But I do every day. I've done that now for years. I am also a business coach, as you said, and I coach from 12:30 on and help men and women in different businesses all across the Pacific Northwest and across other areas in the United States. So it's really kind of cool. Discipline, it's key to it, but it's also that you speak with your own voice from the things that you've lived.
And Dennis, we've got about a minute and a half left. Bring it home.
Well, 2020 is coming, baby. and I think that I saw a cartoon that showed thousands of people crawling over a wall, and Trump was standing there watching them, and the bystander said, "Oh my God, what are you going to do about these illegal aliens that are coming?" He said, "Those aren't illegal aliens. They're Democrats running for president." And I laughed because the field just keeps getting bigger. And as I look and I see the debates, I chuckle because they are swimming to the bottom of the barrel to try and get the greatest number of low-life political perspectives, as socialist, anti-American perspectives, to align with them so that they can come up and go to Iowa and go to Michigan and go to Kansas and try and apply their socialist wares. It is unbelievable. I think that the president is going to simply knock them dead. I don't even care if it's Biden, because Biden's playing the same game with him. I'm more liberal than you are. And I think that the rabid nature of the Democratic Party right now, wanting to be socialistic, is going to create a whole new Democratic Party post-2020 where some people with right-mindedness are going to go, holy cow, there's something called economics involved here, and you people are ignorant on it.
Right.
And things will change.
Dennis Mansfield, we always appreciate you, brother.
Hey, man, it's great to be with you, Kevin. You do such a service for the community. Yeah, from your heart to all the people that you touch and change every day. We're honored to listen to you.
Well, we're honored to have you. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.